Hi, this is Neil from Italia Autos, and in this video I'm going to do a buyer's guide on the Alfa Romeo Mito. Now this is a buyer's guide, not a review, so it's going to tell you all the things to look out for when you're going to look at a vehicle. These faults aren't necessarily on every car, it just gives you an idea of faults to look out for when you're going to buy a vehicle. So don't be put off by this, because some of these faults are only sort of seen intermittently and not very often. The Mito was originally introduced in late 2008 in the UK. Originally came out in 3 trims with several engine sizes. This is a 2016 facelift car, so it does have the updated interior. Now we're going to look at faults on the outside of the vehicle first. These are not faults with every single car, these are just things for you to look out for. They are all relatively cheap to fix, so it wouldn't be an expensive repair bill if you do find one with these faults. We'll start with the front end. The headlight surrounds are very delicate, and also the headlights themselves are very delicate. So if a car has had a light bump at the front, you will find that some of the mounting points for the headlight could be broken. Now there are some repair kits available on eBay. I've never used them, but you can get headlights relatively cheaply now, and they are fairly straightforward to change. The surrounds are quite expensive for what they are, just a shaped bit of plastic. I think brand new they start at around £68. So if one is damaged, do factor in that it could be quite expensive to replace one. The fog lights are normally pretty much bulletproof. You can find they break with stone chips and stuff like that, but they're not expensive to replace. They are exactly the same fog lights fitted to Alfa 159s, Alfa 156s. It's just the mount is slightly different. So as long as your mount is okay, you can buy a replacement fog light for £10. The front grills are liable to cracking as well, because they are quite large, and if anything hits them they do tend to crack. But again, they're not expensive to change or replace. They are very straightforward, and the grills you can have from probably around £25–30 brand new. Another little issue you can get is the main grills. As they're so large and prominent on the front of the vehicle, sometimes the main grille fins can fall off, or they can get cracked or damaged. You can buy replacement sets on eBay to replace individual grills, but you do have to buy the complete set. The later grills don't tend to be available aftermarket like this one is, with the satin finish on the fins. So a new grill from the dealer is around £130, which isn't cheap, so do make sure that your grill's in good condition. But within that £130 you do get a brand new badge as well, because they are liable to fading and peeling. Also on the front bumper there are mounting points behind here. If a bumper's taken off too roughly, you can break these mounts. They're only £11 to replace, but they do need riveting back into position, so just make sure that the front bumper is fitting correctly like it is here. The front end is fairly liable to stone chips, because it is a water-based paint, I do believe, so they do chip quite easily. It's quite the same on a lot of modern cars now. They do suffer a lot from chipping. Other areas that they suffer with stone chips is down on the bottom of the front seals here, so I would advise you to buy some mud flaps of some description, just to stop the chips hitting there. And of course, because you've got wide rear arches at the back, they are very susceptible to chips and dinks here. But as you can see, we do have a patch here to reduce the chipping, but if you fit mud flaps at the front, you will find that that will stop it, a lot of it anyway. I do see quite often broken wing mirrors. They are quite weak here, so if they get knocked they are liable to break quite easily. A replacement wing mirror is around £50 for a used one. These covers can be removed, so you only need to buy the wing mirror, and you can put your own cover on there if you need to. Another main problem with pretty much all modern Alfas and Fiats are these door handles. They break quite easily. They're around £50 to £70 to replace. Now these are the satin ones, so these would be more expensive than normal door handles. They are relatively straightforward to replace, but they can be fiddly to replace. I have done a guide on replacing these door handles on my YouTube channel. I will put a link in now if I remember. The LED lights at the rear, they can sometimes misbehave. The LEDs can sometimes fail, and you won't get a full ring of brake light. Rear lights are fairly straightforward to change, only cost around £30 to replace them. You don't see that fault very often, but I have seen it, so it might be something you want to look out for. And I think that's about it for the exterior. So the exterior holds up pretty well, other than stone chips and bits of grille breaking. They are fairly reliable on the outside. So let's move to the inside of the car now. Now the interiors on Mitos are very nice places to be. They are nicely designed, nice materials in most areas, and they do hold together. Pretty well. Just a few little niggles you get really on the inside of them. Some bits of trim can wear, the edges of the buttons can wear off here and up here. Again, it's only like £20 for a replacement switch. They're not expensive. Sometimes you can get wear on here and on the steering wheel as well. With the seats, you don't tend to have many problems. Over the years, I've probably found a couple where you've got problems with the seat runners, but you can buy replacement seat runners fairly cheaply. You can sometimes have problem with the seat belts. Again, they're fairly cheap to replace and quite plentiful on eBay at the moment. Now, so this is a facelift version, so you do get the updated Uconnect system on the inside, which you can connect your phone to, and it streams all music and things like that. I don't believe this one has the sat-nav on it, but it is an option. After 2014, I think you got cruise control as standard on the Mitos, which is down here, which is a nice little feature to have because it was never available on UK Mitos, and you could never add it aftermarket either. You do sometimes see a little bit of wear on the gaiters, on the handbrake and the gear selector, but again, they're pretty cheap to replace or even buy aftermarket. Everything on the interior is fairly reliable. You can sometimes have faults with the alarm sensor, which is up here. You will lock the car and then you'll get a beep afterwards saying something's open, but it is all closed, or the alarm will keep going off intermittently, and that can be these sensors misbehaving up here. You can buy aftermarket ones, not aftermarket, sorry. You can buy used versions of these from sort of £20 upwards. New, I do believe they're around £100. Little niggly bits on the interior. The alarm sensor or remote locking sensor, whatever that is there, I can't remember. That can sometimes come off and go missing very easily. It's just say it's a little niggle. It doesn't happen too often, but I have had quite a few people asking me for a replacement of those. The main issue you can get with Mitos interior wise is more the power steering. In Mitos, the power steering is all electric, and there's a motor underneath the steering wheel, and that is fairly common for failing. You can pick up refurbished units for around £150, and it's probably around 2 hours labour, 2.5 hours labour to replace them. You do see quite often you will get a steering corrector fault and your steering will go heavy. So when you're on a test drive, just make sure that the steering feels nice and tight and you get no errors flash up on the screen in there. Another tiny little niggle is the boot release handle can sometimes come off or keep coming off, so you may find that that's missing. If that is the case, you can pick up second-hand ones on eBay for about £20. So again, it is just little niggly things, nothing major, apart from the power steering issue. So let's move on to under the bonnet. Now this is the twin air unit. It's quite a modern engine. It's only a small capacity, 3-cylinder engine, so it does sound a little bit like a lawnmower. But if you're not bothered by that, they are a very economical and pretty reliable engine. I haven't really come across many major mechanical faults with this engine, so as long as it's serviced, all up to date, you shouldn't really have many troubles with it. I have found some issues with the gearbox on pretty much all Alphas, to be honest, right the way from the Alfa 159. They didn't use a very strong gearbox, so as the vehicle gets older, you can hear some whining in sort of third and fourth gear. So when you're test driving the car, just make sure that that is all fine. Another little issue I came across on a few Mitos over the years is the earth cable for the battery. It goes from the battery down to the body and then down to the gearbox. On the joint on the body, it does flex quite a bit, so you can find that that can start to fail and the car won't start, or it'll throw up several errors as you're driving. So just make sure that that's all okay. You can access it from the top quite easily, so you can see what condition it's in. Other engines within the range, you've got the 1.3 diesel and you've got the 1.6 diesel, the multi-air units and also the earlier sort of turbo units, the 155 brake horsepower and the 125 brake horsepower engines. You've also got the earlier 4-cylinder, I think it's the fire engine they call it. All fairly good engines. They do have their own individual problems, but for the best part they are fairly reliable engines. As long as you look after them, service them and change the cam belts when needed, they can be very good. Other regular problems you see on the other engines within the range, particularly the diesel ones, you can suffer from cam change stretch if this vehicle isn't serviced correctly. They do like clean oil and clean oil regularly, so you can wear the engine prematurely if you do skip a service or go too long in your service, and lack of clean engine oil can wear the chain guides. On the multi-air engines, they do suffer from the multi-air units failing. They are particularly like hydraulic valves which control the valve timing on the engine, and again, if that's not serviced properly, the little filter inside the multi-air unit can start to clog up and it will damage the hydraulics within the system. They are quite expensive to change. They are about £400 to £500 for a multi-air unit, and quite a lengthy period to replace them, about 3-4 hours to get that changed, and they also need coding into the vehicle as well so you don't get any faults. So they do need to be replaced by a specialist ideally. Cam belts on all the other petrol engines are fairly easy to replace. I do believe that the earlier turbo 120 and 155 brake engines, the turbos are in the way when it comes to timing the engine up. So you will find a lot of quotes. You need to sort of separate the turbo from the manifold so you can move the turbo out of the way to get the timing tools in position. But generally, cam belt changes on Mitos are not expensive. They are fairly straightforward to do, and you shouldn't really be paying more than £300 for a cam belt change. And that's sort of every 4 years. But this twin air engine is a fairly rapid engine for a little 3-cylinder car. They are not the fastest car. They are a city engine really. So around town, they will suit most drivers. They are also very cheap to insure. They're ideal sort of a first-time car or a low no claims bonus car. They will be relatively cheap to insure. A few other niggles on the cars. You can get broken connections here. You can get the cap start to fail on the reservoir. Again, very easy to replace. Turbo hoses can sometimes corrode and split. Again, very easy and cheap to replace. Radiators can sometimes fail, as with any car. Fairly straightforward to change, but you do need to pretty much take the whole front end of the car off to change it. But other than that, they are fairly good cars. Mitos are very easy to service throughout the whole range. It shouldn't be too expensive to have a full service on one of these cars. Brakes and brake discs are fairly cheap to replace. They're not too expensive. I do believe even the Brembo versions are not expensive to maintain. Quadrifoglio or the cloverleaf versions, you do get fancy suspension, so when you stick the car into dynamic, the suspension does firm up a little bit. These shockers are very expensive to replace. The last quote I got was around £800 for a replacement shocker. So if you are looking at the cloverleaf or quadrifoglio, you will want to make sure that the suspension is in good condition and not leaking. Another suspension problem you get is the top mounts on the suspension, which are just underneath here. They fail quite regularly, so when your car is standing still and you're turning the steering wheel, you will hear noises coming from here. Don't worry, they're not expensive to replace. The parts are about £20 and it's about 1 hour's labour to change each side, and that's being generous. But you do see that quite a lot. You do see that quite often on Mitos, but yet don't stress over it because it's not an expensive repair. The exhausts on Mitos, most of them are one piece. So that means from the catalytic converter down all the way through to the back of the car, they are one piece, and they are very expensive to replace. So you may want to look at getting an aftermarket exhaust made up for it if you have one that has failed. Rear suspension is fairly reliable, no major issues to speak of there. Shockers can sometimes fail, but they are cheap and very easy to replace. The lower wishbones on these cars can sometimes fail. They're not expensive to replace and they're not expensive to purchase. You can also replace the ball joint end of the wishbone, which would make the job even cheaper. Another quite common problem are electrical gremlins in the sort of the rear lights and the rear tailgate. Anything that's operated here can sometimes misbehave, all for one simple reason. The electrics which go through the tailgate, with lots of use, they will fray inside and rub together, and they will make holes in the plastic so the wires can rub together, shorting things out, blowing fuses, make things work when they're not switched on. You can buy a loom repair for them, and that's around £100 plus time to fit. So while you are checking your car, just make sure that everything works at the back of the vehicle without fault, and nobody's messed with this here, that would show signs of that they've got a problem with it. But once a repair patch is installed, you shouldn't have a problem with it again. So there you go, that's a quick walk around the car, showing you all the faults that I'm aware of over the years of working on Mitos. They are fairly reliable cars. The unloved versions do tend to have more faults than the loved examples with decent service history. Try and get your hands on the low mileage ones. The multi-air units, I would probably say, are the version I would go for. Really noisy lorry going by. Yeah, I do like the multi-air engines. They're a good versatile engine, economical and pretty quick, but just make sure that it's either had a multi-air unit changed or the multi-air filter has been serviced regularly. You can pick Mitos up for probably around £1,000 now for the early 58 09 plate cars. Nothing particularly wrong with them. They do seem to go on forever. Just make sure that the vehicle's serviced regularly and you've got none of these problems on it, and you shouldn't go wrong with any car from £1,000 up to the last ones released in sort of 2016. They are very good little cars. So thank you for watching. If you have liked this video, please hit the subscribe button. It's always nice to see a new subscriber on my channel. And also, if you think I've missed anything or you have any comments about the Mitos, please hit comment below. And if I could just ask you, if you've liked this video, hit the like button. So thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.